So we are going to be watching round 9 of the Portland Regional Championships between Joseph Ugarte and Aditya Subramanian. Sorry if I pronounced either of those wrong. And importantly, this is a win-and-in match. So the winner of this is going to make it through to day 2 and the loser is not. So Joe has a team of Amoonguss, Water Urshifu, Kingambut, Dragonite, Fire Ogrepon and Chien. And then Addy has a team of Entei, Dragonite, Flutter, Raging Bolt, Chien and Water Ogrepon. So I think if you're Addy in this matchup, you should almost definitely be bringing the Water Ogrepon. Follow Me is huge in this matchup. Joe has no spread moves on his team, and a Follow Me that's also immune to Surging Strikes and to Spore seems really good here. So I think the Water Ogrepon almost definitely comes. I think the Flutter should come as well. There being a Dragonite, an Urshifu, and a Chien on the other side makes Flutter look really good. The Urshifu on Joe's side, however, is Terra Poison, so you'd have to be careful about that, but Shadow Ball will still be able to hit it for neutral if it does Terra Poison. So I think those two should definitely come. I think Addy can realistically bring any 4 of his 6 though. I think I'd also want to see the Entei from his side. I think extreme speeds are going to be very good. Sacred Fire does a lot of damage into Amoonguss and Kingambut, and potential burns is going to be huge, and it's very good into the opposing Chien. And then lastly, Chien also looks very good, but if you bring Chien, you're bringing 3 things that are very weak to Urshifu, so you maybe want to be bringing the Raging Bolt just to be able to cover the Urshifu better. So I actually think he should probably go like Flutter Ogrepon lead with Raging Bolt in the back. And then one of Entei and Chien. They actually cover the same stuff quite well. They both hit the Amoonguss well, they both hit the Kingambut well. Entei is a bit better into the Chien, and Extreme Speed's probably quite good here, so I think actually he should go with Entei as his last. And then if you're Joe, it feels a bit awkward because the Urshifu is really good into half of Addy's team with the Entei, the Chien and the Flutter, presuming it is special attack boosting Flutter, which looking at its moveset, I would guess it is. If it had Icy Wind, then it probably is speed boosting. However, it's really not good into the Dragonite, as if Dragonite does not Terra, all of its moves are resist against it. Also not good into the Raging Bolt, that can just Thunderclap it and probably one-shot it unless it Terras and you're not doing that much damage back. And the Ogrepon is immune to your Surging Strikes and can Follow Me them away. So if you see the Ogrepon, you probably need to U-turn out. But I do still think you have to bring the Urshifu here. So I think he should probably just lead Urshifu Chien, and if he sees an Ogrepon, he can just U-turn it, which is going to do really good damage, and then he'll have the Surging Strikes in the back. And then if you don't see an Ogrepon, you can probably just start Surging Strikesing things, but you do have to keep in mind that the Ogrepon could switch in at any moment. Also, 2 of the things that Urshifu really doesn't like facing are the 2 dragon types, which obviously Chien likes to face. So they work really well together in this matchup, they just have to be careful of the opposing Water Ogrepon. I think then you might want to bring one of Ogrepon or Amoonguss, just so that you have a fairy resist. I think Ogrepon is probably better here because it does a lot more damage. Amoonguss against a team with a Follow Me Ogrepon and a Goggles Raging Bolt probably isn't the best, when there's also an Entei, a Dragonite, and a Chien on the other side. It feels quite awkward to bring Amoonguss when I feel like Ogrepon does a very similar stuff. So I think, I mean, you could bring both Ogrepon and Amoonguss, but I don't think Amoonguss does enough here. Maybe you bring Dragonite just for the extreme speed. I think the way Joseph has to play this is get rid of the Ogrepon as soon as you can, and then try and sweep with Urshifu late game, probably having to save the Terra for it so it's not weak to Thunderclap. And if he does bring Chien, Urshifu, Ogrepon, he is looking a bit weak into the Raging Bolt. He's only got Chien that can hit it, so I think bringing either the Dragonite or the Kingambut to beat that would be good. As it is, Goggles Amoonguss isn't very good into it. And we do see Addy lead Raging Bolt and Water Ogrepon, whereas Joseph leads the Urshifu and the Chien. So the Urshifu doesn't look very good right now. It is very threatened. You might want to Terra it to be able to U-turn if you're expecting a Thunderclap, but Addy might just not expect him to stay in here because it is so threatened. However, Addy's Raging Bolt is threatened with an Ice Spinner, so I think you could realistically Ice Spinner that slot, U-turn the Ogrepon, and you get something good this turn. We do see Addy switch out the Ogrepon into the Entei. So maybe really expecting this Urshifu to switch out this turn. And Entei covers is pretty good into a lot of other things that Joe could go into. So I think that's a very good switch from Addy, presuming that this Urshifu does U-turn. We do see it Terra Poison, so it's not weak to the Thunderclap anymore. And it just goes for a close combat into the Raging Bolt, doing a lot of damage. About 60% of damage. And an Ice Spinner comes out into the Raging Bolt, getting the knockout. That is a huge turn 1 for Joe. Getting a knockout for free. Now he's locked into close combat, which isn't that bad into most of the stuff Addy can go into. If Addy has the Flutter in the back, I think that's a decent switch in here, but it really looks awkward for Addy the rest of this game without the Raging Bolt. And we do see Addy goes into the Chien-Pao, so he did not bring the Flutter main. He could maybe go for a Sucker Punch Extreme Speed into the Urshifu. The Urshifu really has to be threatened by that, but that still leaves the Chien-Pao alone. And we do see the Extreme Speed coming out from the Entei. Is it going to be followed up by Sucker Punch? It is, which is going to knock out, thanks to the Terra making it not resist that anymore. But that does mean Joseph's Chien-Pao gets a free attack. What's it going to do? Is it going to break the sash? Or is it going to get the damage onto the Entei? It just gets the damage onto the Entei. It does about 45%. And we see that Joseph does have a Mungus Ogrepon in the back. And he goes into Ogrepon. So he is going to somewhat struggle with ways to hit this Entei. So I think he really has to prioritize hitting this Entei. Whilst also not letting this Chien-Pao run him over. I think Addy still has a chance of winning this now because of what Joe has in the back. If he had something like the Dragonite, I think Joe would have just won the game if he broke the Chien-Pao sash that last turn. And if you're Addy, I think you have to maybe prioritize getting rid of the Ogrepon and try and win with your Ogrepon. But you obviously don't know what Joe has in the back, which is very awkward for Addy, because if it's the Dragonite, then you have to keep your Chien-Pao to be able to kill the Dragonite. So we do see a Protect coming out from Addy's Chien-Pao. And a Protect coming out from Joe's Chien-Pao. Addy's did outspeed that turn, so he could be the faster Chien-Pao, and a Spiky Shield comes out from Ogrepon as well. Or it could easily be a speed tie, as they both are sashed, but I know a lot of people like to run Adamant, and a lot of people like to run Jolly, so this could be a case of Adamant versus Jolly Chien-Paos. And we see the Extreme Speed from Entei went into the... Was it Extreme Speed or was it Sacred Fire? I didn't see. But we saw an attack from Entei go into the Chien-Pao. I imagine it is Sacred Fire. Because if that lands and then he gets a burn, he probably wins the game from there. But we do see Extreme Speed this turn. But then a Sucker Punch from Joe's Chien-Pao into the other Chien-Pao. He is not confident he outspeeds. A Sacred Sword from Addy's Chien-Pao just KOs Joe's Chien-Pao, and then what's this Ogrepon doing? It is Ivy Cudgeling, getting rid of a Chien-Pao, so they've both lost their Chien-Pao this turn. And with Joe having a Mungus in the back, this does feel really awkward. It does feel like he's really going to struggle to KO this Entei. I believe Addy still hasn't used his Terra either. I'm not sure if he wants to though, because turning into a water type in front of something with Power Whip doesn't seem that good, and keeping the fire typing is probably very, very important here. I think if you're Addy, you just follow me and start spamming Sacred Fire, and I hope that's enough. You probably want to get rid of the Amoonguss first, as that can't protect, so you can always land Sacred Fires into that. And if you're Joe, I think you just have to start targeting down this Entei and hope you can get rid of it. So this has been a very fast-paced game. It feels like there's been a knockout basically every turn. I think there actually has been a knockout every turn except the turn that Joe double protected. And we do see the Follow Me coming out from Ogrepon. How much is it going to take from this? An Ivy Cudgel comes out. How much is it going to do? Oh, and it crits! Doing 95% crits. The Sacred Fire comes out into Amoonguss and does not get the knockout, does get the burn, but that is not that important now. And now Amoonguss eats its Citrus Berry, and it's just going to be able to Pollen Puff KO this Ogrepon. And that's probably the game for Joe. So I think that turn, if Joe didn't get the crit, then Addy probably would have been in a decent position to win this game. Addy could have made a bit of a read there and expected a Pollen Puff Ivy Cudgel and then terrored his Ogrepon, but that feels so risky when Joe could just click the Power Whip button. So I imagine Ogrepon is going to be able to do enough damage. I think if you're Joe, you just Rage Powder and Ivy Cudgel, because that way you guarantee a lot more attacks, and the Amoonguss from Joe's side is not doing that much damage to this Entei. We do see the Ivy Cudgel come out. No Rage Powder. Sacred Fire comes out into the Amoonguss, does get the knockout. I guess Addy was scared that he was going to get spored there. And 2 more Ivy Cudgels might do it, but it depends how much damage this Entei can do. If it had something like Stone Edge, he maybe could have won, although he just died anyway. So Joe wins game 1, probably off that crit. It would have been very interesting to see how the game would have gone without that critical hit happening. I do think he maybe made a mistake with the 4 Pokemon he brought, however, because he struggled so much to beat the Entei in the back. I think he's got to keep that in mind for game 2 and maybe bring the Dragonite instead of Amoonguss. Amoonguss didn't feel like it did a lot to me, and he really called the turn 1 right, and if that goes wrong in like a game 2, he probably isn't in a very good position. And then if you're Addy, the Poison Urshifu is quite difficult. I think you could maybe lead something like the Entei Ogrepon, and then you can start launching Sacred Fires into stuff. If you get a Sacred Fire and then a Burn into the Chien-Pao turn 1, that is going to be huge for you. I also still quite like the Flutter main Ogrepon lead. I think that's quite strong. But then you've got to leave something like Entei, Chien-Pao or Raging Bolt behind, and I don't think you can leave Raging Bolt behind. So you probably leave the Chien-Pao behind, but the Chien-Pao was very good in this matchup. And we do see Addy leads the Flutter main Ogrepon, so he had to leave something from the last game behind. And we see Joe switch up as well with the Kingambut Chien-Pao. Now, Kingambut is in a pretty good position here. We do see that it is the special attack boosting from the opposing Flutter main. Kingambut is kind of threatened, however. A Moonblast Ivy Cudgel probably does pick it up, but if it just protects, it can get a free... Chien-Pao can get a free attack off. So maybe, if you're Addy, you probably just follow me and Gleam, but I think you could also Gleam and Ivy Cudgel. Terroring here with your Ogrepon isn't the worst idea, but if there's an Amoonguss in the back for Joe, then keeping your grass typing with Follow Me is going to be huge. I do feel like Joe's in quite an awkward position. We do see the Follow Me come out, no protects. And a Gleam comes out. Addy's Flutter main is faster than Joe's Chien-Pao, so that almost definitely is an Adamant Chien-Pao. We do see the Ice Spinner come out, does about 55%, which is quite good, and the Kowtow Cleave just knocks out the Ogrepon. So, if Joe had Ogrepon in the back, not Ogrepon, if Joe had Urshifu in the back, I think he would be looking very good for the rest of this game, but we have seen he has the Fire Ogrepon and the Amoonguss. So Addy goes into the Raging Bolt, and now we're in a bit of a weird situation because Joe could just double Sucker Punch his Flutter main. This Flutter main is Terra Grass as well, so it can't Terra to get rid of its Dark, to resist Dark like most Terra Fairies could. So a double Sucker Punch would pick it up. So Addy cannot just freely attack with his Flutter main if that's going to come, but if Addy protects his Flutter main and does something with his Raging Bolt, a double Sucker Punch into that would... Joe would get nothing from that turn, so we're in a bit of a mind game where Addy is probably going to protect his Flutter main and attack with his Raging Bolt, but if he gets Ice Spinnered, that might not work. So we do actually see a Terra coming out. What's going for the Terra? It is Addy's Terra for Raging Bolt, which is Terra Water, so this means it will live, well, it will resist an Ice move. It does mean he is weak to the Ogrepon in the back, but maybe Adi is presuming that there is Amoonguss and Urshifu in the back based off of what he saw last game. We do see Fluttermane protect, and Kingambut protects as well. Who does Adi target into with his Raging Bolt is the really important question. If it is for Chien-Pao, he'll be in a quite good situation, but if it's the Kingambut, he's really not. And it is for Kingambut. He went for the Thunderbolt, probably trying to put it in Thunderclap range so that it can never attack really the rest of the game, as long as it's in front of this Raging Bolt. But now we're also in another awkward situation. Does Joe go for the double Sucker Punch? And if he does Adi switch out his Fluttermane? Does he protect again just to stop Sucker Punch? But now also the Raging Bolt from Adi's side is quite threatened. Joe could also try and avoid the mind games by switching into Amoonguss, but with a Goggles Raging Bolt on the field, it's not going to do that much. It can obviously put the Fluttermane to sleep, but it can't redirect or put the Raging Bolt to sleep. So he probably does just want to play these Sucker Punch mind games and try and get it right. He does Sucker Punch with his Chien-Pao into the Fluttermane and Sucker Punch with the Kingambut. He gets it right, gets rid of the Fluttermane this turn. And that is huge for Joe. Now we'll have to see, what does this Raging Bolt do? It does Thunderbolt into the Chien-Pao, getting rid of the Chien-Pao. But I think Chien-Pao has done all it needs to now this game. It depends on what Adi has as his last. And we do see that Joe goes into the Ogrepon. The Fluttermane, no, not Fluttermane, the Raging Bolt is now weak to it, and we see Dragonite. So, having Dragonite here is also quite interesting because the Ogrepon can't hit it for much damage. And we've seen that Joe has Amoonguss in the back, which also can't hit it for much damage. So he is going to have to preserve his Kingambut well to be able to beat this Dragonite. It is banded and Adi has no Pokemon left, so whatever it locks itself into now, it is locked into for the rest of the game. So it's fairly safe for Joe to just double protect and just see what it goes for. It might also let you see if there's a protect coming out from the Raging Bolt. And we do see that Joe just double protects. There's no protect coming out for Raging Bolt, so it can protect next turn. It just Thunderclaps. We don't see what into, but I imagine it's into Kingambut. And an Outrage. That is probably the best thing that Adi could lock itself into. And the Outrage does target the Kingambut, so he doesn't take the spiky shield damage. So in this situation, Joe does still have his Terror, so he could Terror his Ogrepon to do a lot more damage. But it's whether a Sucker Punch and an Ivy Cudgel double up would KO this Dragonite. I think it would be fairly close. We do see that he is going for the Terror on the Ogrepon, so we'll have to see if this double up does KO the Dragonite, and if he even gets to, because if there's a... Oh, actually the Kingambut probably isn't in Thunderclap range. If you're Adi, you probably are protecting the Raging Bolt here and then trying to get damage onto the Ogrepon. But obviously you can't decide to target with Outrage. Sucker Punch does come out, does 45%. Is the Ivy Cudgel going to pick up the knockout? It is +1 terrored, but it is resisted onto a Dragonite, and it does pick up the knockout. That is huge for Joe. Joe's just won the game with that play. There is no way this Raging Bolt can win this. And Joe, just when he really needed to, made all of the right calls, and that was so huge for him. I feel like Adi played pretty well, but Joe was just on another level that game, really just calling every turn that he needed to right, with the double Sucker Punch, not going for it straight away, and then going for it when Adi did attack, protecting the Kingambut when Adi targeted into it. That was just an insanely played game by Joe.
With the winner of the final match on stream, Joe Ugarte. And listen, that was some stress watching that match out and playing and unfold. Like, talk me through the thought process knowing what your opponent was running.
Yeah, you know, so when you're in a win-and-in situation, especially versus a good player, it's definitely tough, right? I mean, you have to make a lot of calls, and me and Adi have had the, I guess, I would say pleasure, but maybe we don't want to play each other for win-ins all the time. But we've played each other for win-ins so many times over these past couple of years. So it's always like, a really kind of tough match because you have to make a lot of calls, right? And especially with like two teams really centered around that priority spam, when it's, sucker punch or when you have extreme speed, there's a lot of reads that go into it, especially when there's like Terragos and other stuff in the mix.
So knowing that you played against Adi and that there is familiarity there for those win-in situations, did that influence the way that you approached the matchup at all? Just knowing how he tends to even play the game.
There's always a certain factor of that maybe, I guess, but I think it was just the way the teams kind of matched up. It was more of just like you have to make the right calls in the situations. You have to trust your gut on like which calls are correct in some situations. And like, I think it's tough because in win-in there's a lot of pressure, especially obviously like I feel a lot of pressure a little bit, but like it was a good set. I think he made a lot of good plays. I think I made, the plays I needed to make and, worked out in my favor. So
let's talk about that for a second, because you're coming in as the reigning Portland regional champion.
Yeah.
You also have a second regional championship title under your belt from Portland.
Yep.
So, like, is that pressure? Like, what does that pressure even feel like?
So it's interesting because obviously, and to a degree, you have to be realistic. It's not like a specific location for regional changes, like how you're gonna do. But it's just a regional that's very special to me. It was my first regional win, and it was my second one too. So I would love to make it, third win. I don't think anyone's ever won 3 of the same regional back to back. So that'd be really cool to do. But I think, overall, like I think going into it, I had a lot more pressure on myself. As I played through the day, I actually was down to 2-2 like in the beginning of the day. So I was at like not a great record. I'm sitting here, I'm like, ooh, like this is not looking good for the repeat, right? But as I played more, I think I got more comfortable, and I'm pretty proud of how I played that round 9 for what it's worth, because I think I kind of like got into the groove with the team and like kind of was more confident, I think, towards the end of the run, especially bringing it back. And, I can't, I think the pressure-wise, even though there's pressure there, like now I feel a little bit better now that I'm day 2. I know I'm supposed to be here and I can play my best tomorrow,
Yeah, of course. And pressure aside, I think you have to give yourself a lot of credit because you have been able to put up like impressive result after impressive result. And I think that also comes with its own certain type of pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Where like, can you continue to keep doing that? What does it feel like to be a player on that side of things?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I think now I'm kind of getting into, I think it's my 7th year of playing in like the middle of this upcoming year, or I guess this year now, 2024 already. But it's kind of interesting because I feel like the more you play, the more pressure you put on yourself to perform well. Mm-hmm. And I am trying to also balance that a bit, because I think when you're playing so many games of Pokemon, there's so much variance, there's so many different calls you can make. So one way I shifted my mindset for this year, besides Portland, I really want to win Portland, but besides that, kind of getting in this place where I feel really good about how I'm growing as a player, as opposed to focusing so much on the results. Because for me, realistically, besides this regional, it's really like I want to win an international, I want to win worlds. Like those are my end goals. It's insane because I don't think people realize how hard it is to be a world champion. You have to, right now there are only, I believe, 10, 11 world champions. That's insane. Like to be in that group is so hard and it takes so much work. Like some of the best players you could know will never achieve that, and that's insane. So to me, like that's where I'm really trying to shift my mindset towards, like not the individual tournament, but how can I get better as a player and what can I learn from each tournament to take into future tournaments as well.
And this tournament has its own unique level of difficulty on top of it as well, because we have new Pokemon, it's a new regulation. How do you find approaching a tournament like that? Do you enjoy it with all of those choices available to you?
Yeah, so, it's really interesting. I think new Pokemon are always a good thing. I think one thing that's been really a source of contention with Scarlet and Violet has been like, oh, the power level of all the individual Pokemon. I actually think it's pretty cool. Like, I think it's cool that a lot of Gen 9 Pokemon actually get to shine and like perform really well. I mean, Adi had Raging Bolt. Raging Bolt's been performing super well in a lot of tournaments. You have obviously some mainstays on my stuff like Urshifu, Chien. They're still good Pokemon, right? So I think it's cool that over the course of like the multiple regulations, we've kind of seen the build up where you have like old concepts incorporated into new teams, and then you also have, some different stuff that's coming out of it. So.
I'm surprised you didn't want to run Sun, Joe.
Yeah, I know. Usually I would, but I don't know. Something in me was just like, this isn't the tournament for Sun. So if I don't win, I could blame it on that. But I think for what it's worth, I made the best team choice I could. So.
I think so as well. So feeling okay going into day 2?
Yeah, I feel good. Honestly, like I think once you make day 2, it's a lot better because you kind of are like, yeah, I deserve to be here. I played really well. Like I made it to day 2. And I think now it's just like focusing on that next goal to make cut. And I'm going to be giving it my all. You know, I really, really want to win. And this is a really important regional to me and like event. So, you know, I'm just hoping I can take it far.
I know you prepped really hard for this event as well.
Yeah.
So wishing you the best of luck tomorrow to showcase more of that.
Yep. Well,
Shout outs.
So Sierra, of course, you know, even though I did not run Jump Left Sun with you, you know, I'm glad you got to experience the good and bad parts of it. You know, and just thank you for being there to support me. You know, Navjeet as well, you know, we're rooming together as well. Super awesome dude, you know, one of my best buddies. A couple other things, Marco Fierro, I'm finding like, I'm thanking him a lot because sometimes like he'll just tell me like, you don't need to do this. I was thinking of changing my Dragonite to Farigiraf at like 5 minutes before team submission, and he was like, don't do it. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, okay, I trust you. And I use Dragonite so much today, so thank you, Marco. And you know, to mom, dad, I know you guys are watching, and all my other friends, I know there's so many to name, but thank you guys so much, all for the support.
Love hearing the support for you, and also knowing that everybody needs a friend that will tell them when they need to not use the idea that they put forth into the universe.
Yes, it's someone to tell you that you have a bad idea is very good sometimes.
Well, that's the best advice I think a lot of people can take away. But Joe, thank you so much for your time, for sharing your thoughts, and good luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, casters, back to you.